Hello BookTube, welcome back to my 2024 library tour. This video is a continuation of my history collection. I'm going to be doing this bookshelf here, which includes my Ptolemaic collection and my Alexander the Great collection, and there's some books at the end. So let's get going. I know I probably should have Alexander first, but I don't. I mean, I might change it eventually when I rearrange this collection. And I possibly should put the Ptolemies with the rest of the Egypt books, but I have a bit of a break where, for me, ancient Egypt is to the Persian conquest, if not the Assyrian conquest. And then the Ptolemaic Egypt is something different. But anyway, let's get on with the books. So first up is The Last Pharaohs, Egypt under the Ptolemies, 305 to 30 BC by J.G. Manning. This is a scholarly, dense history of the Ptolemaic dynasty. I have two biographies of Cleopatra. Cleopatra the Great, The Woman Behind the Legend by Dr. Joanne Fletcher. We saw her yesterday with her story of Egypt. So this is okay, although I did lose interest in the book, which is fairly typical with me and Cleopatra. I don't really find her all that fascinating. And I've struggled with her biographies. I also have Cleopatra Alive by Stacy Schiff, which, again, I did not particularly get on with. Although I think I might have lasted a bit longer with Cleopatra the Great than I did Cleopatra Alive. But I do need to revisit both of them. I also have a group biography of all 7 Cleopatras. Cleopatra, the most famous one, was the 7th one. So this is the Cleopatras, the Forgotten Queens of Egypt, although I'm not entirely sure how forgotten they actually were. I mean, you can make a case, obviously, Cleopatra the 7th was not forgotten, was never forgotten, and you can debate how forgotten her predecessors were. But this is by Louis Llewellyn Jones. This is an okay book. I liked it well enough. I mean, it is fairly good, a fairly good look at the Cleopatra and her forebears, but it wasn't spectacular. I have not gotten to Antony and Cleopatra by Adrian Goldsworthy. This is The Darkening Age, The Christian Destruction of the Classical World by Catherine Nixie. So this is about the dark side of the Christian triumph, and it is quite harrowing. Now we get to my Alexander the Great books. I have 4 biographies of him. Dare I pick up a 5th? First up is Alexander of Macedon, 356 to 323 BC, a historical biography by Peter Green. This is the first biography of Alexander the Great I ever read, and I quite like it. It is still probably my favorite. But I also quite liked Soldier, Priest, and God, A Life of Alexander the Great by F.S. Neiden. I thought this one was very good as well. And Alexander the Great, His Life and His Mysterious Death by Anthony Everett is also quite good. I have a more contentious relationship with Philip and Alexander, Kings and Conquerors by Adrian Goldsworthy. I think Goldsworthy does a fairly good job with Philip, but I'm not all that fond of his when he gets to Alexander, or the part of the book that covers Alexander. I'm not as fond of. I think Naiden and Everett both do a better job, and of course, Green is still my favorite. I also have By the Spear, Philip II, Alexander the Great, and the Rise and Fall of the Macedonian Empire by Ian Worthington. So this is a history of the Macedonian Empire as a whole, rather than just biographies of Philip and Alexander. I also have a book on the War of the Successors, Dividing the Spoils, the War for Alexander the Great's Empire by Robin Waterfield. And I probably need to revisit this. It's been a while since I read it. I also have a book on Roman religion. This is Pantheon, A New History of Roman Religion by Jörg Rupka. And I'm fairly sure this is translated. Yes, translated by David M.B. Richardson. Which is probably formed the nucleus of a very small Roman collection, but for now it is not. The next two books are German History in Translation. First up is Aftermath, Life and the Fallout of the Third Reich, 1945 to 1955, by Harold Jahner. Translated from the German by Sean Whiteside. So this is a history of Germany, I think mostly West Germany, in the aftermath of the Second World War. And for about 10 or so years after the war. In a very weird way. I remember the book reading fairly weird. Next up is In Hitler's Munich, Jews, the Revolution, and the Rise of Nazism by Michael Brenner. This is also in translation and is translated by Jeremiah Reamer. And so this is a look at Munich between the wars, and it is quite good. I really enjoyed this book. Next is Raised to Rule, Educating Royalty at the Court of the Spanish Habsburgs, 1601 to 1634 by Martha K. Huffman. So this is a study of the education of, I think, Philip IV and his siblings. And it is quite interesting. A bit difficult, but interesting. I have not gotten to Against the World, Anti-Globalism and Mass Politics Between the World Wars by Tara Zara. This was longlisted for last year's Kundal History Prize, and it did not make the shortlist. Many of the rest of the books from last year's Kundal History Prize long list that I picked up are currently in the boxes of doom. At some point, they will be donated. Anyway, moving on. The next book is a presidential biography. This is Grant by Ron Chernow, a biography of Ulysses S. Grant. Next is a group biography, She-Wolves, The Women Who Ruled England Before Elizabeth by Helen Castor. So this is a group biography of Matilda, who should have been the first Queen of England, Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was Regent of England for pretty much the entirety of Richard I's reign. Isabella of France, who was basically, she overthrew her husband Edward II and was regent of England for a few years during the minority of Edward III. And Margaret of Anjou, who was, for much of her husband Henry VI's reign, pretty much in charge. She was regent for him. And it also goes into a little bit of Lady Jane Grey and Mary I, which really it should be the women who ruled England before Mary I. But Elizabeth I is more popular than her sister, so she gets the byline. But it is quite interesting. Next is some Asian history. This is the history of Bhutan by Karma Funcho. So this is a massive history of Bhutan, which is a small Asian country nestled between India and China. And it was quite good. And finally, the last book on this shelf, After the Romanovs, Russian Exiles in Paris from the Belle Epoque through Revolution and War by Helen Rappaport. So this is a look at Russian nobility, aristocrats, and royals who found themselves stuck in Paris after the revolution, as well as probably political exiles before the revolution as well. I haven't gotten around to this book, although I have heard many great things about it. So eventually we shall see them. In BookTube, that concludes this shelf. I will be back with more of my 2024 library tour and more history later. So until then, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.